So I was cleaning up my MacBook Pro tonight, and I noticed I had an old discussion, a Selenium User Group Meetup discussion from about 2 years ago, left on that MacBook that I never published on YouTube. So we need to make that right and finish that up. So tonight, we're going to go ahead and publish that discussion for you and let you have a chance to listen to Andrew Knight and his talk about getting started with Appium Mobile testing with Selenium. It's a great discussion. Andrew's an awesome speaker. He's a great guy. He's beautiful at being able to explain things in a simple way. And so I think you'll like it. He talks about using Selenium in cloud testing with mobile, and I think you'll like that journey. So without further ado, oh, this recording's a little rough. So you'll have to listen through me a little bit in my roughness. So but Andrew does a great job. Have fun. This is Mike Verinder. So this is Selenium User Group Automation monthly lunch and learn. So welcome. We are waiting for Andrew, and he'll be here shortly. Hey, so Andrew, you going to Star West?
You dang right, I'm going to go to Star West.
All right, brother.
You going to be there yourself?
Yeah, I'll be there. We should think about some things that we could do together, maybe.
Okay. Well, I will be there pretty much the entire week. I am giving a full day workshop, a half day workshop, and a track talk.
Oh, wow. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just standing behind a booth, man. So.
Well, we will definitely see each other. And anyone who's listening, if you haven't heard of Star West, it is one of the premier testing conferences in North America. It will be happening the first week of October in Anaheim, California. I think it's at one of the Disneyland hotels. Is that true?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And for people in my group, I'm sure we can hook up a discount code and get you a discount if you're interested in going.
Fantastic.
Sweet.
All righty. Well, we are 4 minutes past the hour. Shall we dig in?
Yeah, I say let's start. Just a quick blurb. And thank you, Andrew, for hooking us up, man. And this should be a great discussion. Appium's a beautiful tool. It's something we use every day, or if we don't, we're always evaluating using it every day. I did say at the beginning of the last month that we'd start doing monthly lunch and learns. I did notice we had over 70 people register for this event, so you'll see a lot of recorded sessions as well. It's only we only gave a couple of days notice. Well, I think last Thursday I sent the invite out. So and Monday I sort of reiterated it. So that's pretty good traction in such a short amount of time. So anyway, I don't know if you guys know who Andy Knight is. So he's with Applitools. He's called the Automation Panda. He's got a big blog. He's very active in the community, very active. So anyway, thanks, Andy, for taking your time and looking forward to the discussion.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Well, hello, everyone. As Mike said, my name is Andy Knight. I am the Automation Panda. Currently, I am a developer advocate at Applitools, where I help people get the most value out of their testing, and I help Applitools meet the needs of the community as well. I'm also director of Test Automation University, where we provide dozens of courses online for free about software quality, testing, automation, all the good stuff. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. I love TAU even before I joined Applitools. But all that aside, a little bit more about my background and what we're going to talk about today. Historically, I have been a software engineer in test, or in SDET, whatever title you want to give it. I've been doing testing and automation for pretty much all of my career, over a decade now. And I have a lot of experience with, Selenium. Yes, I've done 2 very high scale projects with Selenium WebDriver spanning multiple years. So I can honestly say, yes, I would be a Selenium expert. But then coming into mobile, I cannot say that I'm a mobile expert. I am a mobile beginner. And what I want to share with you today is my journey into mobile test automation as a Selenium user. Because I believe that while mobile has its own challenges, and it has its own stack and its own tools and technology, and arguably it is harder to automate tests for mobile, what I have learned is that the techniques and the practices you use for mobile testing are very much the same as the ones you use for web UI testing with a tool like Selenium. So it's an easier, I won't say easy, but an easier kind of transition to come into that. So if you have like very specific questions about how something works in Appium, or like comparing Appium versus Espresso or something, I probably can't answer those questions because, like I said, I haven't done it very much. I mean, what I'm about to show you is about 80% to 90% of what I've done with mobile. But that's okay. You know, we're all on a journey together, and I want to show that it's possible. I'm going to show you my entryway, so that if y'all were interested to get started, you could kind of follow in those footsteps, or maybe do something totally different, but recognize like, oh, you went that way, maybe I'll go this way. It's all good. That's what we're here. We're here together to learn. So, and also today it's going to be a lot of me talking and screen sharing. I don't have slides. I didn't come with like a presentation or an agenda. This is literally us here to talk shop, where I will be doing probably most of the talking. But if anyone has questions about stuff as we go along, I've actually got the chat window open. So I'll see that and I'll try to answer as it comes up, or we can save some time for question and answer at the end. All cool. Here on the screen I'm showing, I want to show some resources to help get us started. Everything I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to show you here. Save those links. I'll pop them in chat, and then you can walk along with us. So the first link is an article that I wrote. Mobile testing for the first time with Android, Appium, and Applitools. Basically, everything I say today is here in written form. So if you wanted to follow along with this, or you wanted to share with somebody afterwards, here's your article for it. Oh, somebody's saying in the question and answer, chat is disabled. Oh, I just sent the link out in chat. Are folks not able to get that? I'm not sure. Mike, can you check on that, please? Yeah, okay. Were you able to get my message at least? I did send it out to everybody.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, so maybe there's something going on with this one person. Sorry, friend. I'm not
Thanks,
sure.
Zoom.
Thanks, Zoom. Oh gosh, don't get me started. But anyway, so here's this article. Refer to it. Hopefully, it can help you. Also, I recently gave a webinar with Applitools on this very topic as well. So that particular webinar is very similar to the one I'm going to have giving today. Today, I'm going to focus more on you're a Selenium tester, how do you get started? That was more on how do you just get started in general. So I will send this here. It's online, it's recorded for free. All the example code that I'm going to be sharing today, I'll be showing an Appium project in Java, and we'll step through it together. That is available on GitHub. So if you want to take a look, here's the link to that. Excuse me. Oh, and that's my Applitools. Sorry. That's something different there. Okay, so let's actually dig into the material of today. So mobile testing, what do we mean? What I mean is this. You're going to be testing on some sort of mobile device. here is my iPhone 7. Look at it, it's got a picture of my puppy dog. Isn't she cute? She's a French bulldog. I love her. I've also got this awesome carrying case on the back. Mobile devices are different than laptops. We have different concerns with that. When you have a desktop or laptop, you've got this big old screen. Your main interface is typing or using a mouse. It's probably connected to a power supply, so you don't have to worry about battery or anything. And it's meant to be kind of like a workstation. Like you sit down at a desk. I don't know, maybe you're at the beach or something. But anyway, you're on your laptop, hands-on, boom, 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 and you're trying to have a more immersive experience. Whereas with mobile devices, this is for like on the go. Like, oh, you went to the store and you want to look price comparison. This particular camera that you're looking at, is it cheaper on Amazon or something? Just buy it here at Target, you know? Or maybe a tablet, like you're reading the daily newspaper on a tablet while you're, you know, taking the morning train to work or something. I don't know, right? Mobile platforms are different than web platforms than like desktop or laptop platforms. You can do testing of browsers on a mobile device like Chrome or Safari on your iPhone here, or you can do testing on native apps, like, you know, something that you go to the App Store and install. Same basic premises for both of them for testing. Today, I'm going to focus on native mobile apps, but note that the techniques can apply to either one. The painful parts that come with mobile testing are that, first of all, you need to have a device, right? When we do our web browser-based testing on a laptop or desktop, it's typically we just need to get the browser on our machine: Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge. Thankfully, IE is now dead. I hope you don't still have to test IE. Oh my gosh, it's a whole nightmare. I'm sure y'all Selenium friends remember that nightmare. But to do Selenium, it's like, okay, I got a machine, just get the browser on there, and then I install a Selenium executable thing, and I'm good to go, right? Well, when you're testing mobile platform, you can't usually, you need more than just your laptop, right? You need a type of device. So you need either a physical device that you're going to connect with like a USB cable, or you need some sort of emulated device that you set up a whole bunch of stuff on your laptop, or you need to go out to some cloud vendor and get a device from them and do it remotely. So there's that complication. There's also the complication of there are so many kinds of devices, right? You've got small phones, big phones, tablets, portrait, landscape. Everybody's got a different viewport size because it's dictated by that particular model. There's hundreds of models out there. Which one do you pick? I don't even know. You got Samsungs, you got iPhones, you got Pixels, you know. Thankfully, like in the industry, there's two primary platforms. There's iOS and Android, but those are two completely different ecosystems as well. Because just because you have an Android app doesn't mean it runs on iOS or vice versa. Anytime you have a mobile app, it's like you actually have two apps that are trying to look identical to each other. There are frameworks out there now like Flutter, where you kind of write once and it can go to anywhere, including web. But you know, classically, you still have to have multiple versions of the same app. So you've got those ecosystems you got to deal with. You've got all the devices. You've got all this stuff. Oh my gosh, all the stuff is piling up, right? And when you test, you also have to be concerned not just of things like does the thing work, like functionally, but performance is a bigger factor, because you typically have less firepower on a device than you do on a laptop. So if you do things inefficiently, then it feels a lot slower, especially when you're like touch tapping and everything. And the less performance something is, the more battery power it eats through. So that's another aspect of performance that we typically don't consider when doing like browser-based laptop or desktop testing, right? So there's a lot of extra stuff going on with mobile. It's not unconquerable. You know, we are testers, we are engineers, we've done Selenium. If we can figure that out, what's the next hop to Appium, right? So we can do this. So in my journey, when I was looking at this whole, oh my gosh, where do I begin? I had to make some choices about how I was going to get started. And because for me, this was more of I primarily had this as a learning adventure. I didn't have like some major project where I had to automate tests for a particular app that my company was doing. It was more of, okay, it's time for me to learn this and level up and get started. Where do I start? So what I chose to the first decision was, which ecosystem do I engage? Do I engage iOS or do I engage Android? as I said, two completely different ecosystems, two different technology stacks entirely. If you're doing iOS, you're fully in the Apple world. You've got to have a Mac to develop. You've got to have Xcode as your workbench. You're going to be writing in Objective-C or Swift. I don't even know the names of the Apple UI libraries anymore. I know a while ago there was like Cocoa or something. Then you're gonna, you're very, very much Apple centric and all that, and you need a special Apple developer license, and there's fees, I think, or something associated. I'm not exactly sure. Somebody can correct me on that. So there's that world. Then there's the Android world, which is the Google side of the house. So there are many, many more Android devices than iOS devices because anybody can run Android. But the operating system is a bit freer, if that makes sense. Like it's you have more ability to like install them in different places. They're not as restrictive, and you don't need like a special account with Google in order to do Android development or anything. All the Android apps are basically developed in Java. Asterisk, it's not Oracle Java, it's Google's implementation of Java. That was a Supreme Court case. You can go look it up. But basically, you're using Java, and so, and when you're testing it, like when you're developing and testing it, it can be like on any platform. Like you can do it on Mac, you can do it on Windows, all that good stuff, right? You're not tied to like the Apple ecosystem, right? So in my journey, when I was looking at these two things, I was like, which one am I going to do first? I chose Android. Why did I choose Android? Because I thought it would be easier for me, right? The idea of being a little more free. The idea of doing Java instead of having to learn like Swift or Objective-C. I already know Java, easier thing. And also, contextually for me, in my past, a long time ago, I actually dabbled in Android development. I think it was like in 2015, I took a Udacity course on how to build your own little Android app. It was like a little weather app. And at that time, I actually had a physical Android phone. I was on Republic Wireless. And so it was really cool because I could do like, physically download it to my phone and like play with it and stuff. And it's like, wow, this is cool. And it called out to APIs. It's my first foray into mobile. So I had that slight background experience with Android development before. Now, granted, things have greatly changed since that time. And I don't even remember half of what I've learned in that course. But still, I had a sense of familiarity. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to choose Android. So with Android, to get things set up, let's talk about the tooling here. So if you're going to be doing Android, you're going to need to have Android Studio as well as Android emulators. Again, everything is explained in this article. But oh my gosh, where am I looking? Here it is. So Applitools actually has a demo app for Android that I chose to test. I could have tested like a real one, but I wanted an app that I had like access to the full source code, the projects. That way, like, I mean, my plan wasn't to come in here and like redevelop things, but I at least wanted to have the code that I could run on my own. Like I could build a project, I could run it through Android Studio. So I wanted that kind of experience just to kind of refresh me and like make me feel kind of like a real developer, right? So here I have Android Studio. That's this IDE here. Android Studio, I think it's based on like one of the JetBrains IDEs. Somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong, but it has a very similar feel to like IntelliJ IDEA. Cool. I will warn you, if you choose to go the full Android Studio route, I think it took me like 13 gigabytes to install. It was an enormous workbench of tools. I mean, it wasn't just like the IDE, it was the emulator stuff and all that, but it was like, it took me an afternoon just to do the downloads and installs. So I will warn you, if you think, oh, I can get started in 10 minutes. No, friend, you gotta, maybe, I mean, and I'm on Google Fiber gigabit internet, and my routers are those Google Wi-Fi hockey pucks. So I'm not like physical line, but when I test it, my connection on Wi-Fi is like, 800 megabits per second. And it still took me like half a day just to get the freaking things downloaded and installed. So caution there. So anyway, I have Android Studio open. I have the demo Android app that I'm going to be using for testing. Again, it was a demo app that Applitools developed, called it Applet Fashion. It's like an online shoe store, and you'll see it in just a moment here. And so you can see, like, here's the code of the Android app. Like, here's, oops, move this out the way. You know, you've got like the manifest file. Hopefully my code here isn't too small, but you've got things like the different activities that go on, and you can see this is just Java code. You know, there's fancy framework stuff going on that I don't fully understand even, but like an activity is kind of like a main page. Like you have the product activities, like the product page, the main activities, like the main page. We call them activities because they're so interactive with behaviors on it, I guess. I don't know. Somebody at Google had fun naming these things. Here we go. So, I mean, you can look around and play around in that. It is open source repository. I could share the link a little bit later. I forget exactly where it is right now. But moreover, even if you don't want to get into the code, one thing you will need, unless you're going to be physically hooking up your devices, is the emulator portion of Android Studio, or the device manager, I think it's called. Like I said, I have an iPhone. I don't have any Android devices anymore. So I needed to emulate devices in order to be able to do this testing. And that's pretty typical. You can plug in physical devices on USB and try to find them and all. But that can be a bit of a hassle, especially if like you have an old device or you're trying to work over a network or something. So most people, at least for like local development, based on what I could learn, you know, again, newbie here, what I learned is that most people just end up using emulators for this kind of stuff. So here I have an emulated device.
Just a quick question, just a
Sure.
quick note, guys. So sorry about chat. I did fix it, but I think we'd have to start the webinar to get it to work again. But so yeah, so my bad. But if you write down your questions and send them to me after we're done, or send them to Andrew if he feels like indulging, we'll be happy to get them all answered. So again, I apologize, but sorry, Andrew. Go ahead, man.
No worries. No worries. Or I mean, like it looks like Q&A is active, so people can at least type questions in Q&A, even if we can't have dialogue, like written dialogue. Yep. Cool. So so anywho, like I was saying, yeah, when you go about this, you can choose how you want to handle your devices. I chose to do emulators because I didn't have a choice, and also it made it a bit easier for me, I thought, than plugging in physical devices, just because it's like, oh, I can have it here. So on my screen here, inside Android Studio, there's the device manager. And what you can do is you can choose to create devices. And so you can choose the hardware you want, anything from TVs, phones, tablets. And so there's a bunch of preloaded types of emulatable devices here. You could probably search online and find even more. This is just what came with Android Studio when I said, yes, give me the emulators. So I actually created two devices. I have the Pixel 3a, which is a phone, and the Pixel C, which is a tablet. Right here in this window you're seeing, this is the Pixel 3a that's running on my machine. I've increased the size so that more people, it's a little easier to see. The real phone isn't that big. But yeah, this is an emulated Android device currently running on my machine. I know in the past, emulation was very resource intensive. Like when I did my course with Android development back in like 2015, trying to get a single device running on my machine was like super intense. Everything was slowed down. Right now, I'm running this, like it's actually live. My machine has no performance hit whatsoever. So that it's gotten better over time. I can say that because I have experience doing that now. I am running an M1 MacBook Pro, so there is that aspect as well. I'm using a very beefy machine. So, but all that to say, like on most modern laptops or desktops, you're probably going to be okay to do emulation. So here is that app, like I said. And what I can do through Android Studio now is I can actually run the demo app and show you like, here it is. All I got to do is, so like I can choose the device I want to do it. The device has to be running. Also, you might see something here is like API 32 and stuff. There's different levels of Android APIs. I just chose like the most recent one. I'm sure like if you're doing like hardcore testing, you might want to check like current as well as a few back. We're just going to go evergreen here. So if I run this, boom, you can see now, oh, hey, it loaded the app. So here is the Apple Fashion Shoe Store. Now, typically on a phone, you'd be using your fingers to scroll and tap and everything. We're going to, use your mouse. That's okay. So I can scroll down and see everything on the page here. If I click on any one of these shoes, it'll come up with the product page. And, there's drop downs and stuff. I can add it to my cart. If I click this, I go back to the home page. And that's really all there is to this app. There's also a filter where it's like, oh, I want to only look at black shoes. You can do filters like that. Again, this is a demo app. This is literally the extent of what's in the application here. But you can see like, okay, cool. So I have successfully run my first Android app on my own machine. Woo! Great. Yay. So we can do manual testing, right? We can do manual testing with our emulator. Step 1, check mark. Cool. So once I had this running, the next step for me was, here, let me reset this real quick. Oh, there we go. Okay. The next step for me was that, okay, first A is done, Appium or Android, got it running. Let's do the next one. Let's start doing testing, automation. Where do we go from here? How do we automate tests for Android native apps? There's a couple different paths you can do, different tools. I chose to use Appium as my automation tool. Appium is essentially Selenium for mobile. That's the simplest way I can describe it. It has a EO, Selenium Appium. Woo! So creative, right? There are other tools out there, like one of the more popular ones is called Espresso. I've heard that Espresso does some added quality of life, developer experience things for you that Appium doesn't. But because I was a Selenium user for so many years, and I'm literally just trying to learn, I want the lowest learning curve possible. I chose Appium because I thought that it would be intuitive for me to kind of figure out, right? There'd be some differences, of course, but because underneath it's still Selenium WebDriver protocol and all that good stuff, that it should be an easy enough transition for me. So that's why I chose Appium. Also began with A, so I have Android and Appium. Woo, fun, automation. My name is Andrew. Oh yes, so much fun. So then I was like, okay, what do I have to do to get set up with Appium? I just have to get a Java package in a project and go, just like with Selenium, right? No, there's more setup you have to do. So the first thing we got to do with Appium is we have to set up the Appium process. Much like with Selenium WebDriver, where for every browser we have a WebDriver executable, for example, Chrome driver for Chrome or Gecko driver for Firefox. Appium needs an Appium server running on the machine where tests are running. It's kind of analogous to that WebDriver service. In order to set up that Appium server, you've got two choices. You can either set up the Appium desktop server app, whatever you want to call it, or you can run it as a Node.js process. Either way works. It's the same. I chose to do the Node.js way because I felt like that would be easier to launch from command line and stuff. I have not used the desktop app for Appium. I don't know what it's like. I know it's out there. If anybody has experience with that, I'd love to hear more so I could learn. But ultimately, let me kill this real quick. What you have to do if you take the route I did, you need Node.js installed on your machine, yet another thing. And you then need to go get the Appium package for Node.js. And something that kind of struck me as odd at first, but it's just the way the tech stack works. Even if you're using Appium in a different language, you still need Node.js under the hood to run the Appium server. So I wanted to use Appium in Java because I'm familiar with Java. I thought it would be nice to write the tests in the same language as the Android application. Java, keep everything Java world. So I was kind of surprised at first, like, oh man, you mean I need to bring in JavaScript technology just to run the Appium server? Yes. So I use Node Version Manager to manage all my Node.js installations. So currently I am running on Node.js 16. I can go back as far as 10, as forward as 18. I think 18 is like the current one. Disclaimer, I'm also not an uber JavaScript person. I use JavaScript. I prefer TypeScript. I even prefer other languages over that. That's just me. I have more experience with other languages, but I can play around with JavaScript when I can. So it's like, yeah, Node.js, it's on my machine. Okay, if not, it's pretty easy to install. Okay, and then I need to run Appium through Node.js, whatever, fine. Keep the JavaScript stuff over there, right? So once you have to do like, npm install global Appium, or it's some command like this. I already have it installed. So once it's installed, you can just run the script like this, Appium. And what we'll see is, haha, we're running. Yay, this is goodness. If you see this, you win. I am running Appium 1.22.3. There is Appium 2.0 that's coming out. I believe right now 2.0 is still in beta. At least when I went down this exercise, either it was still in beta or it was like just out of beta or something. I chose to stick with version 1 because most of the online guides I was following were version 1. You know how that goes. It's like a brand new thing comes out. Nobody has a thing. If you get stuck, you're on your own. I was trying to lower that bar to entry. So I'm like, I'm gonna just do what people have done before. Like, totally honest here. I'm giving real talk. I'm not holding back like this. And I'm like, professional or like expert or something like that. Right? No, I'm just figuring this crap out just like everybody else. Like, I'm trying to keep it safe. I'm trying to keep it easy. I'm trying to make sure it works, because nothing's more frustrating when stuff doesn't work and the guides aren't there, or they tell you the wrong things. There's even details I'll show you in a little bit where I got screwed up. Anywho,
when was this, Andrew?
I mean,
when
like
did
2 months.
When did you go through this the first time?
I mean, this was like 2 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's still fairly recent to me. And I mean, other disclaimer, the reason I went down this path is because my company, Applitools, just released their native mobile grid. It's like a whole new product offering for them. And so I was like, oh, it's time for me to actually pick up and learn mobile stuff, because now my company's doing it, right? So, I mean, that was my impetus. Plus, I mean, I was curious because I had never really done hands-on mobile stuff before.
Did you get that far?
Get as far as what?
Putting it on the grid?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Okay.
And I can show that a little bit later. So I achieved success. It worked, So that was cool. So it's like my impetus was company has new product that does mobile. I mean, some of y'all out there, it might be your impetus is that your team has picked up a mobile project and now you need to test it. I mean, it could also be like something to keep in mind, big picture. Mobile apps are arguably more important than web apps now, right? Yep. It's 2022, right? If you need to do something online, do you reach for your laptop or your phone first? Which one's more convenient, right? First thing I do every morning when I wake up, my alarm goes off on my phone. I turn it off. Then I scroll to my email and my Twitter and the news real quick for like 5 minutes before I get up, slide the phone in my pocket. Then I go downstairs and I take my puppy outside. And while she's doing her duty to God and country on my lawn, I'm out there either taking a picture of her on my phone, or I'm looking up something else on my phone, or I'm on Slack on my phone. Phone. It takes an hour before I even come up to this office and get on my laptop. Like, how many times have I done something online by then? Probably a dozen on my phone. So mobile is arguably more important than web now. Yet, when it comes to test automation and how many people are actually doing mobile testing, it still lags behind based on any number of surveys and data that we've seen. Like mobile testing
it's definitely harder, right?
Yes.
So there's the iOS world, which is, quite frankly, the iOS world is easier than the Android world. And the Android world is harder because of the massive number of devices.
Okay.
And all the devices have to be sort of tweaked in different ways. In fact, when you were showing your setup and all the emulators, you were actually, if you go back and look at that, they had a list of devices that were on there.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Here, create device.
There you go.
Yep.
Right? So when you're releasing software, you really have to think about all the devices from an Android perspective. From an iOS standpoint, things are pretty stable, right? You have to think about versions of iOS more than you actually have to think about the actual devices of iOS.
That's a good point.
So,
Apple keeps their ecosystem much more controlled.
yeah. So from an automation standpoint, or being able to get a handle on it, the iOS aspect of it is easier from an automation side. And the Android is just a freaking nightmare.
Just so you're saying I made the wrong choice,
right? And so you're always finding bugs and all these whack devices here and there. The iOS side is a little harder, only in that you're still waiting for Apple person to officially approve your app. So you can have CI/CD and a whole lot of releases, so to speak, but the Apple Store still has to approve your app before it goes to prod. You can do the beta, and you can release the beta in iOS, but before it goes to prod, it still has to have that Apple guy. You don't have to have that in Android. You can do whatever that is, right? So I apologize, man. I interrupted.
No, you're good. This is good discussion. This is good discussion. Man, how do we even launch on that? I probably went off on a rant and then something. Anyway, coming back to this. So I'm running Appium. Here it is. It's running on Node.js. I'm using version 1.22. 2.0 is coming, or it has come, or something, but I just wanted something that was more known, more supported as of right now. And so right now, this is just going to be just like a daemon process on my machine. I have my window open. It's going to run in the background. If this is not running, your tests are not going to be able to work. So that was step number one. Another thing that you may want to do when you are setting up Android stuff, or not Android stuff, Appium stuff, excuse me. You want to make sure that all of your pieces are in place. And so there's this tool called Appium Doctor. Again, it's like a Node.js thing I've installed. Yep. And so when you run this, it basically scans your machine to make sure everything is okay. So here, it's checking all the different things like, oh, do you have Node.js? Do you have all these command line tools? Do you have your environment variables set appropriately? Like I had to go set Android home and Java home and things like this. There were some other like Mac OS kinds of libraries that weren't there that I had to install with Homebrew. But Appium Doctor will just kind of tell you, these are all the things. So that way, when you see all these check marks, you're like, okay, I'm set up. I can't remember all the little tiny things off the top of my head, but in the article that I shared, I kind of listed them out.
Okay.
Yep. So then once you have Appium running and you have everything set up with that, there's another tool called Appium Inspector. And that's this thing right here. This is an optional tool, but I found this to be very helpful as I was trying to automate my tests. And so I recommend that when you're setting up your workbench, you get everything installed, you check with Appium Doctor, you run Appium, you have your emulator running, and then you've got Appium Inspector here to show that you can run your app through this as well as through your code. So what this does is it will kind of like with web automation, like you run in Chrome, you hit right click, you go to inspect and you can see the whole page. That's what Appium Inspector does for you. To run Appium Inspector, first of all, you do need the emulated device or the physical device running or connected to your machine. So we still have ours running here. In fact, let me stop running it from Android Studio here. So we have the emulator running, but we don't have the app running. What you then need to do is you need to provide all the connection details for not only the device, but also the app you want to run. So I'm running by default on localhost on this port. They're just default values. If you're using Appium version 1, you need to have your remote path of /wd/hub. If you're running Appium 2, I think this can just be a /. In fact, that was one of the things that screwed me up. I was running Appium 1. I didn't set this the way it was supposed to be, and I couldn't find it for like half an hour. Then I realized, oh, I have to set this. I connected it right. Then you need to set up all these different desired capabilities. If you've done Selenium WebDriver, you're probably familiar with desired capabilities. It's the same thing. Same thing as for Selenium. It's just we need them for Appium, and Appium requires very specific ones. So you need to set things like the platform name. That's got to be Android. Then for all the Appium specific properties, you need to prefix them with Appium : That's like the new WebDriver standard. So you need things like automation name. There's a couple different automation drivers for Appium. We're using UI Automator 2. I don't know what the others are. I don't know what makes them different. But I do know is that this is not set to UI Automator 2. This thing won't work. You can't, this is not an arbitrary name. This is a very specific name. I don't know why. I don't know what. Just, I trust it. One of those, again, I don't know. I'm sorry. This is what it is. But the things like the platform version and the device name, these are specific to your device. So my platform version for Android is 12, and that's tied to like API version. There's like a matrix mapping there. This is the name of the device running on my machine. You could match up here. Now the app. When you are testing your Android apps, what you are testing essentially is the app file running on your emulator. So with Android, your app files or your binaries or your packages, whatever you want to call them, are in this .apk format. So it is very typical, from my understanding, in terms of mobile development and testing as a process, CI/CD, lifecycle, whatever you want to call it, that there would be your app repository, that there would be unit tests run against it as part of CI, and then the result of the build from CI would be this APK file that then testers could either download from the CI server and put it on their machines to run the tests, or you could have that be the next step in your CI pipeline where it picks up that APK file as an artifact and then runs that on an emulated device and moves forward. Ultimately, it's this APK file that represents the app that is what you need to test. So I need to provide a path to the APK file for that particular application to run it on my machine. When I ran the application through Android Studio, it was actually just building the application code on my machine and running that on the emulated device. If you need to get that APK file, which you can do from Android Studio, is you can go to the build, and then you can say build bundles APKs, and you can build the APK. And then it'll print it out, or it'll generate that and put it on your file system, and you can pick it up. So that's essentially what I've done. I generated APK files. I actually stored them in my own test project. So you'll see the Applitools Appium Android webinar directory here. That was that GitHub repo I shared earlier. I just saved it in there for convenience. And then you also have to provide your package name, which comes from the manifest, and then the activity, which in this case, like what's the page you want to start on? I want the main activity. That's that home page with 2 columns of the shoes. So a little bit more intense to set up your desired capabilities than a typical Selenium WebDriver web UI test. Yes, I screwed this up the first couple times. I got things wrong. It was a bit of a chore, but once I got it, I was like, okay, save it. It works now. So with all this set up, what I can do now is I can start the session. And what you'll see is that on my, oh, come on, let me move this. This is actually going to run. No, I do not want this. What the heck is this from? What this is going to do is it's going to run my APK file on this emulator here that it's targeting. So I start the session. And please work. There it goes. It's a bit slow. Mobile development runs slower than web. But here we can see, okay, so I have that app running, and I can do stuff on this page. As soon as I touch it, it's gone. But then here in my inspector window, you'll also see that I have that particular view loaded. And if I hover over any of these elements, you'll see, oh, they're highlighted. So I can click on one of them. And so here, the selected element for this particular shoe picture, it shows how that element, or all the information about that element. Things like if you want the XPath to get to it, it's here. If you want to get the resource ID, which is typically what you'd use for locators, you can use this. Provides all sorts of other information. And so I could choose other elements. I could say, hey, what about this one? And I get a different one, or I could be like, hey, what about like the text here? And so just like you'd be doing inspection of a web page, you can do inspection like this of your Android apps, which is pretty cool. If I wanted to change the page, you're going to have to come over to your device and like click on a shoe here, and then come back to here and do a refresh. Oh shoot, where's the refresh button? Here we go, refresh. And so once you refresh it, then, okay, now we're on a new page here and I can start selecting things again. So that's how you can do inspection. Again, this is very helpful to have, kind of like debugging your application. I would consider it a prerequisite before you can even do automation, because how do you know what you're going to click unless you can find the locators?
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. Not just cool, it's like it's necessary. Otherwise, it's like you're in a cave without a match or a candle or something. So now that we've got Appium set up, like, oh, and also in order to run Appium Inspector, you need to have that Appium process running in the background. There were times where I started Appium Inspector without it, it wouldn't connect. I'm like, what the heck's going on? Oh, because I didn't run Appium. Dang it. So yes. So now that we have all of Appium stack in place, we have Android, Android Studio and Emulate, we have Appium and that whole thing running. Now we can actually automate tests. So here we go. And if I just explode my window here, it's like, yes, all of this is running on my machine at the same time just to do mobile stuff. Yes, it's a lot. So looking into the tests, here is another IDE open. This is IntelliJ IDEA. I have my Android Appium test project open. I shared the repository before. That's this repository here. And so this is a Java project that has Appium tests. All that stuff still needs to be running in the background, but the basic structure of this project, I chose to use Gradle instead of Maven for my dependency manager, because with Android projects, they use Gradle by default. Why? I don't know. Someone at Google decided Gradle was better than Maven, I guess. Gradle's a little bit more powerful than Maven for the things it can help you do. Am I a Gradle expert? No. Could I tell you what those things are? No. Was I able to figure out Gradle as a Maven user? Yes. Consistency. Yes, there we go. So like here, you can see this is the build file. So you can see all the dependencies I have. You know, I've got what do I have here? JUnit, I've got Appium that pulls in Selenium. I also pulled in Selenium 4. I also have Applitools in here, and we'll see that in a moment. But standard Java project, nothing fancy. My test is under here. It still follows the Maven directory layout. So I have the applet fashion test. And this is where I would be calling Appium. So we're going to walk through this together. So I'm going to focus on like the core of the test. I did use Applitools in here, and I'll explain that secondarily, but I want to focus primarily on interactions with Appium first. So when it comes to Appium, what do you need? Just like you would have a web driver, you're going to have an Appium driver. You give it like the Appium URL. All those capabilities that we saw from Appium Inspector need to go into building your Appium driver. So again, one of the reasons why I did Appium Inspector first was because I needed all the same capabilities. Let me make sure I can like quickly poke them and change them and get them working, and then just copy and paste into automation code. So you're going to see a lot of the same kinds of stuff like the main activity. I did create an input reader class to read things from environment variables, so that like I didn't want secrets hard-coded or anything, or if I wanted to switch something, I could. So things like the platform version, the device name, and the path to the application, that APK file, all parameterized. So I did the Appium driver. Then the test case shop for shoes here, very, very similar to Selenium calls. Get element by ID. I scrape this ID as the resource ID from the Appium Inspector. This get element method, it's kind of what you would expect. You're waiting until the presence of the element to be located is there. So I want to make sure I wait until the element appears on the screen. And then I want to say, driver, find the element, give me the element object. Once I have that element object for whatever locator, what am I going to do? I'm going to click it. So that's safety checks built in. We all know synchronization with Selenium sucks with Appium too. You're going to have to do it yourself. So then other things like, if I want to filter for a particular kind of shoe, I like here, this one was opening the filter menu, get element, click. Click would be like tapping. So same API, just, get the element again. What am I going to do? Filter by black shoes, get the filter thing, click, get the filter thing, click. Tapping the first shoe and the thing that's found, get element, click. Right, wait for something to appear, just get that element. There's other cool things I suppose I could do, like if I had drop downs and all that, you could put that here. Excuse me, someone's asking, can we write XPath without the tool? Inspect the element and get the ID name. Yeah, all of your selectors are going to work. I played around with XPath as well. My only thing is like, you're going to need to use Appium Inspector to figure out what that is, because otherwise, how are you going to know? I mean, I suppose you could go into like the source code of the application and find things, but most people aren't going to do that. Most likely, most people are going to open Inspector, look for, okay, what is the structure of the page? Where's the element? And then use whatever they find there. So that was how I handled interactions, right? Very, very basic interactions. I mean, if I were to here, like I can use autocomplete right now, right? You have an element, okay, you can click, you can get text, you can clear, get all the properties, get the location. If you've used Selenium before, all the API is there. So very, very transferable in that sense, which is nice. It's like, oh, okay, so I'm not hung up on this. Oh, another question. I mean, like web application inspect and write your own XPath. I mean, you can write your own XPath. I'm not sure. Like, you mean like in Appium Inspector, when you choose an element, it just gives you like a full XPath. So if you wanted to refine that, you could do that yourself. I'm not quite sure what else is meant by, whoops, this question here. Oh, that was a Chrome thing. I don't want to do that. I don't know what just happened there. X that out. And again, like my playing around with this has been very limited. So there may be better ways to do inspection that I'm not yet aware of. Anyway, so oops, back to the code here. So that's how I handled the interactions of things. Now, if you were going to do the verifications, like making sure something appears or making sure something has a particular text element, as you saw, you could do all those kinds of things as well. The approach I chose to take in this project is I chose to take a visual testing approach. That way I wouldn't need to like constantly be flipping through the inspector and trying to find elements. I wanted to use Applitools and just say, take a snapshot of that whole page and then compare it over time. I thought it would be easier. Yes, I also work for Applitools, so I had the tool available to me. It made sense to me. And so that's where you see all these eyes check things. So at the top here, like I did, do all the setup for Applitools. It works for web, it works for mobile, it works for native mobile. So just real briefly, like I created a visual runner that's going to run it in Applitools Cloud, set all my API key, my batch name. When I created my Appium driver, I also added on Applitools Eyes, which is the thing that captures snapshots. And then if I test, any time that I wanted to verify something, like, okay, I open the filter menu, let me take a visual snapshot of the filter menu page. I could have done something like, get element, make sure the title's right, make sure all the filter items are there. That could add a lot of code. visual snapshot, one line, boom. I don't have to think about it. So when I run this, like not only is it going to it's going to run the test, on my local machine with this emulated device, but it's also going to take the snapshots and upload it to Applitools and run it on their native mobile grid. So let me stop the inspector here. Quit the inspector. So to run the test, whether you do it a traditional approach or Applitools, anytime you're running an Appium test, you do need to have that mobile device available to you. So I've got the emulator still running. What I can do is I can launch tests from my Appium project here. I already have all of the environment variables and stuff set in my configuration. So all I have to do is hit the run button here. And what we'll see is that I'm going to move this to the side here so we can see it. So it's a little bit slower than web testing to get up and running, but we're running my Java test. It's a JUnit test. And we can see how the emulated device, you can see my hands here. It's loaded that page, and then it should take a snapshot. Then it should load the filter menu. Eventually, come on, it's slow. I ran this before. I promise it worked.
While we're waiting, just so everyone knows, you can use iOS with Appium too.
Yes, yes.
And it's pretty common, pretty extensive that people use it. So
yeah, good point.
It's just Android's hanging out with Android. Andrew is just hanging out with
correct
Android today. So
correct. Appium works for both. Okay, so anyway, as we saw, it did go through the other screens. It marked the test as passing, meaning it didn't hit any failures along the way in doing this workflow. So that's good. Now, my assertions, because they were visual assertions with Applitools, they aren't going to be recorded here. If we wanted to see those, we'd have to go up to the Applitools dashboard. And so if I refresh here, here's that run that was done. And so it's currently cranking through the visual checkpoints it took. Here's the run I did earlier, and you can see like it captured 4 visual snapshots, and now it's going to do the comparisons. So that's just a visual testing approach. You don't have to do it that way. I thought it was easy for me because it's like, hey, it saves me time. It's a little more comprehensive, right? Because it captures everything on a page, not just the elements you pick. So it takes a little bit for it to get through here, but boom. So, oops. If I open up one of these snapshots, what you can see is it goes, does a visual diff side by side, and there were no differences detected because it was the same page. Other cool thing is, whereas that device I had locally was the Pixel 3a, here in Applitools native mobile grid, I've actually tested 3 different devices. I've tested a Galaxy S21, a Galaxy Note 10, and a Pixel 4. So even though those devices were not on my local machine, they were up in the Applitools cloud, and I was able to cover them.
Yeah, so, that's very cool. So Andrew, I'm so sorry, man. I think I missed. How did you integrate that with Applet?
Oh yeah, here. So I'll bring my project up again. So here is my app. There's too many APP sounds going on. This is my Appium Android test automation project. So to integrate with Applitools, if you go to your dependencies and the build Gradle file. So just like you would need an Appium dependency, you can add an Applitools dependency. So I got the eyes Appium Java 5 package. Okay. I also have an Applitools account. You will need that so you can view your results. And then it's just a matter of creating the Applitools test project, or Applitools test objects in your test case. So like I have a visual grid runner, that's what connects to native mobile grid. I have the Applitools eyes object, that's what takes the snapshots. And then anytime you want to take visual assertions, it's just eyes.check. And it will.
And just asking, so is that a free version? Is there a freemium /paid, or what is that whole relationship?
So you can use Applitools for free. This project will work on the free tier. So that way, if anybody wanted to get started with mobile testing, they could check out my project. If they didn't want to do visual stuff, they could scrap it. Or if they wanted to do visual stuff, they just have to go register a free Applitools account. It's either email or GitHub account. You don't need to put in my credit card information or anything. Pop their API key in as an environment variable, and then run this, and they're good to go. The free tier limits like how many checkpoints you get per month. So it's like you're not going to be running like thousands of tests for free. Like they keep it limited.
Okay.
They also limit you to how many you can run in parallel. So you can only run one checkpoint at a time. So what that would mean here, like I've got three different devices that I'd be running. You could only run like one device at a time. Whereas me, because I have an insider account, I can actually run these in parallel. But I mean, it's just a matter of the time it takes to execute through them is all. But yeah, anybody can sign up and try this for free and see if they like the visual testing thing. Personally, I think when I was going through this, it saved me a lot of time because I'm like, I don't want to have to go frick around with like trying to figure out every single X path and going back and forth. It's just give me the bare basics and then just verify the whole page.
Well, I mean, and it was pretty simple from an integration standpoint, right?
Exactly.
You weren't doing 100 different things to hook up applet to your test, right? So
exactly, it was just like pop it in, easy, boom.
Yep. So very cool.
Yep. So that was my journey in an hour of me mostly talking. I guess like if I were to take next steps from here, real quick, what those would be, like if I were to add more tests, I would probably use a design pattern like the screenplay pattern or page object model, right? Here, I've basically just shown raw Selenium WebDriver calls just to kind of keep it, again, simple for a demo. But if I were to scale this project, of course, use something like screenplay or page objects. I would probably also, like, as far as the journey of learning, I would try this for iOS as well as Android. In fact, that is on my radar. I'm going to be doing that. There's also other test frameworks out there like Espresso and XCUI. So those it would be interesting to see how those compare to Appium. You know, like I heard from somebody almost callously saying, Appium has got a lot of stuff to it. You should try Espresso because it simplifies things and has better developer experience. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll find out eventually, I guess.
Okay. Is there any special tool that you would use if you just wanted to push something to beta instead of like from test to prod, instead of if you just wanted to do something in beta, and where you sign up people just for beta? Or have you gone down that path yet?
Wait. In what context are you saying? Like,
using?
I'm confused by what you're asking. I'm sorry.
Well, let's say you had your app, which you showed us, right? And let's say you wanted to push that to a beta environment.
Oh, right? the mobile app itself.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we want to push the mobile app to like a beta environment for people to test. What would that look like?
Where you want to try, where you want a smaller group of clients, I would say, to test it out before you release it to the millions of viewers, right? So
sure. So what would it look like to structure that?
Have you done that before, Andrew?
So I've done that with web stuff. I haven't done that with mobile stuff.
Okay.
How I would pursue that with mobile. Something to keep in mind with mobile app development is that there is a front end and back end component to it, right? Just like with web. You know, web, your front end is that JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Back end is all your APIs and stuff. Mobile is no different. It's just that instead of being a website that you're delivering as a front end, your front end is this mobile app that is a file or bundle or APK or whatever, depending on iOS or Android, that is a file that ultimately you are shipping to someone to get it in their hands. So with an Android thing, what that would probably look like if you wanted to kind of beta test with a specific set of users, you would have your CI system pump through the whole thing, right? You would build your app, you would unit test your app code, you would build your app code, you put it out there, you would probably run it through like your Appium tests or your Espresso tests or whatever. Ultimately, the delivered artifact would be some APK that has gone through automated testing. And then you would, what I would say is like, whoever that set of users are, I'd say, hey, here's the link to get the beta. Install this app on your Android machine. Trust me, it's not sketchy. You probably wouldn't put that through like the Google Play Store or something.
Right. So,
right.
I mean, I know in iOS we use Test Flight, an application called Test Flight for beta. Right. We push things to Test Flight. We have our group sort of defined, and then we sort of release there. It's a mini prod, right? So release there to make sure that none of the big bugs are still outstanding, and then release the product after that. But I didn't know if Test Flight works with Appium or not. So
I don't know enough to answer.
Cool beans, man. Thanks.
No problem.
Neil, and so I guess I had two other quick points, and I apologize. I know your time's short. So first off, what is do you have like is there a big differential between cloud providers from a mobile perspective? For example, the Catalan guys, obviously I'm a Catalan guy, but the Catalan guys or the browser stack guys or the sauce guys, right? Or obviously Applet, right? Is there a big difference between any of those? I know I will say, in relationship to everything else that I have seen with Applet is very simple from an integration standpoint, right? In all of their testing that I've seen so far, right? It's just copy a little bit of snippet, and in a visual perspective, but it looks like from a mobile perspective as well. But what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So what I would say is, like, I'm not as familiar with the mobile side of things, but I have used basically all the big providers for web, and their mobile offerings are almost mirror. And I would say between most cloud vendors, they're all the same.
Yeah.
But Applitools is different, and I'll explain why in a moment. So with what I would say are traditional cross-browser or cross-platform testing or cross-device testing platforms, like what you would see with Sauce Labs, Smart Bear cross-browser testing, Lambda test. Who am I forgetting? Browser Stack. Did I say Browser Stack? I can't remember. What they do is they're basically WebDriver as a service. They have in their cloud environments, you basically make a request and they provide a session to you that is a WebDriver based remote session where you can send the commands as if they're on your local machine, or as if it's like Selenium Grid on steroids.
Yep. And with the little wrapper on it, right?
And so how you would develop your tests would be the same whether you're doing it locally or whether you're using their platform, because ultimately the premise is, okay, you have a test case, let's say a web test or a mobile test. You develop the steps for that test case, given when then, step 1, 2, 3, go here, click this, wait for that, verify this, done. The nice thing about like Selenium and Appium is that the interface for those interactions is abstract enough that it can hit any type of browser or device that you want using the same kinds of commands. You just kind of say which one you're targeting. But you still have to run that test start to finish. So if you want to test 5 platforms, that test has to run start to finish 5 times, right? Yeah. And so that's what those cloud providers are offering, to say, okay, well, you don't have the hassle of setting it up on your local machine, but you still do have to run it start to finish all those times on the platforms that you choose. And that becomes slow because now you have a multiple times the number of platforms you have, but also typically what I found is those cloud platforms are slower to execute than what you find on your local machine.
Okay.
So what makes Applitools in that sense different is that when you come to the Applitools cloud, we have the ultra fast grid for web, and we have the native mobile grid for mobile. What makes it different, it's not like you are requesting a session in there and then running your full test on it, but rather what you're doing is you are taking a leaner, more modern approach and saying, okay, well, instead of running the entirety of my test against all these platforms, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my test once, whether that's locally or in some CI system. And I'm going to capture visual snapshots throughout my test. Like I showed, like the product page or the shoe page or the main page or the filter page. You capture that visual snapshot. And it's not a screenshot. It's actually the full page. It's the DOM, the JavaScript, the HTML, the CSS. We capture that at a moment in time so that we can then re-render it on any configuration we want. So you run your test once, you grab your visual snapshots, and then what those grids are for, the Applitools grids, the ultrafast grid and the name of mobile grid, we're basically just taking that snapshot and re-rendering it on the target configuration. So you don't have to run it again 5 times to hit 5 platforms. So it's a much leaner approach. It's a lot faster, you know, because it's like, oh, I just need to, you know, and you can get a lot more done. And what we're focusing on is not so much that, you know, you're going through the whole thing on every platform, but rather you've got the visual renderings and we're checking to see, okay, if you render on Chrome, if you render on IE, if you render on, you know, iPhone versus tablet versus Android, whatever.
Galaxy,
right? You know, we can quickly re-render just the screens that you want and then do our visual comparison. And so that is the differentiator that makes Applitools a fundamentally different tool than the others, so to speak.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Andrew. One other question, man. So this seems like great content. Well, it seems like great potential content for your test automation university.
Oh!
Right?
Wow.
So since you just happen to be the director of Test Automation University, right? Do you foresee these types of classes in TAU?
Sure.
Okay.
So, whoopsie. Hold on, there's my screen. My screen disappeared for a moment. So we already do have a number of courses in TAU on mobile testing. We don't have anything yet specifically about the stuff I just talked about with native mobile grid or anything. They're coming. I'm sure we'll get them up within the next year or so.
Okay.
So just stay tuned, y'all. In the meantime, like, we do have content on for people who want to learn more about Applitools and visual testing. We do have tutorials for Applitools, where basically for all of our SDKs, all the things we support, you can go to applitools.com/tutorial and see how to use it in that context. We also have documentation on things, and we're actively working to make those things even better and up to date and all that good stuff. So it doesn't have to be a TAU course.
Cool. All right. Got anything else?
Oh, I think I've said enough.
Yeah, well, you're actually the presenter, so you actually have to close. So
okay, no problem. Alrighty. Well, again, everybody, thank you for attending. It's been fun. Mike, thank you for inviting me to the inaugural Lunch and Learn.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys.